For most of their life, the empath rarely stops to question how much they are giving. It feels natural to them. When someone is hurting, they listen. When someone is confused, they offer guidance. When someone is overwhelmed, they step in and try to bring calm to the situation. Their ability to sense emotions and respond with compassion often makes them the person everyone turns to during difficult moments. Friends rely on them, family members confide in them, and even strangers feel comfortable sharing their struggles. At first, this role can feel meaningful, almost like a purpose. But over time, something begins to shift inside the empath. The giving never seems to end. The emotional conversations keep coming. The problems they help carry rarely belong to them, yet they are the ones who feel the weight of it long after the moment has passed. They find themselves thinking about other people's pain late at night, replaying conversations, wondering if they did enough to help, or if they could have said something better. What once felt like compassion slowly begins to feel like exhaustion. The turning point usually arrives quietly. It might happen after a particularly draining interaction or after noticing a pattern that has repeated itself for years. The empath begins to observe something they had not fully acknowledged before. They notice that they are always available when others need support, yet when they are the ones struggling, the same energy rarely comes back. They realize that they are often the listener, the problem solver, the emotional anchor, but rarely the one being supported with the same depth. This awareness can feel uncomfortable at first. Empaths are used to focusing on others, not evaluating how others treat them. For a long time, they may have believed that love means giving without limits. But slowly they begin to understand that constant giving without balance creates a quiet emptiness inside. They start recognizing how many times they ignored their own needs to keep someone else comfortable, how often they forgave behavior that left them hurt, how frequently they stayed patient even when the situation was clearly draining their emotional energy. This realization does not instantly turn the empath into someone cold or distant. Instead, it sparks an internal awakening. For the first time, they begin asking themselves an important question: why am I always the one giving everything? That question becomes the beginning of a powerful shift. Because once an empath truly sees the imbalance in their relationships, it becomes much harder to ignore it. And that awareness is the first step towards something they may have never done before in their life: choosing themselves. When an empath begins to turn their attention inward and prioritize their own emotional well-being, something unexpected often appears almost immediately: guilt. For someone who has spent most of their life caring for others, being available, and putting other people's needs before their own, choosing themselves can feel deeply uncomfortable. It almost feels like they are breaking an invisible rule that has guided their behavior for years. Empaths are naturally compassionate, and because of this, they often develop a strong sense of responsibility toward the emotions of others. If someone around them is upset, they feel compelled to help. If someone needs support, they feel it is their role to provide it. Over time, this constant pattern creates an identity built around being the one who understands, forgives, and sacrifices. So when the empath finally begins to step back and protect their energy, their mind starts questioning the change. They may begin thinking things like, am I becoming selfish? Or, what if people think I don't care anymore? These thoughts can create a strong internal conflict. On one side, the empath knows they are emotionally exhausted and need space to breathe. On the other side, they worry about disappointing the people who have come to rely on them. Psychological perspectives shared by voices like Dr. Gabor Maté often highlight how people learn early in life to suppress their own needs in order to maintain connection. When someone grows up believing that love is earned through selflessness and emotional availability, setting boundaries later in life can feel almost unnatural. The empath may unconsciously fear that if they stop giving so much, they might lose the relationships they have built. But what they gradually begin to understand is that protecting their emotional well-being is not an act of selfishness, it is an act of self-respect. For years, they have been pouring energy into others without asking whether that energy was being replenished. Choosing themselves simply means acknowledging that their feelings, needs, and peace matter just as much as anyone else's. At first, this new way of thinking feels unfamiliar. The empath might start with small changes, saying no when they feel overwhelmed, stepping away from draining conversations, or taking time to rest instead of constantly being available. Each of these moments may come with a small wave of guilt, but they also come with a quiet sense of relief. With time, the empath begins to see something clearly. Caring about others does not require abandoning yourself. Compassion and self-respect can exist together. And the more they allow themselves to accept this truth, the lighter their emotional world begins to feel. One of the most eye-opening experiences for an empath occurs when they begin to assert their own needs and boundaries, and suddenly the reactions of the people around them reveal truths that had been hidden for years. For most of their life, empaths have been reliable, endlessly giving, and consistently available. Friends, family, and even casual acquaintances often take their patience and compassion for granted. People grow used to knowing that the empath will always be there to listen, support, and absorb emotional turmoil. But the moment the empath begins to step back, something remarkable and sometimes jarring happens. Not everyone responds with understanding or gratitude. Some people respect the change immediately. They notice that the empath is no longer endlessly available and may even begin to mirror that level of respect, valuing the empath's time, energy, and boundaries. These relationships often deepen, becoming more balanced, more authentic, and more mutually supportive. But others react with frustration, disappointment, or even resentment. They might criticize the empath, accuse them of being selfish, or try to guilt them into reverting to old patterns of constant giving. These reactions can feel shocking at first, especially for someone who has spent years prioritizing others above themselves. This stage is revealing because it exposes an important truth. Some people were drawn to the empath not for who they truly are, but for the constant emotional support they could provide. The empath begins to see clearly which relationships were built on genuine connection and which were built on dependency. It can be painful, but it is also liberating. The empath realizes that not everyone in their life had the capacity or willingness to respect their boundaries or honor their autonomy. And that's not a reflection of failure, it's simply reality. Through these reactions, empaths learn a profound lesson about the value of self-prioritization. They begin to understand that being compassionate and generous does not require being endlessly available. They start to see that true respect from others comes when they honor themselves first. It's a turning point that shifts their perspective on connection and love, revealing that the quality of relationships is far more important than the quantity of effort invested. By observing how people respond when they finally choose themselves, empaths gain clarity. They begin to differentiate between relationships that nourish and those that drain. This insight allows them to step fully into their power, protecting their emotional energy while still offering kindness where it is truly appreciated. It is a moment of awakening, one that changes how they relate to the world and sets the stage for healthier, more balanced connections in the future. When an empath begins to set boundaries, their entire relationship with themselves and the world around them starts to shift in profound ways. For most of their lives, empaths have absorbed other people's emotions, problems, and expectations as if they were their own. They are natural caretakers, constantly offering support and understanding without hesitation. While this generosity comes from a place of deep compassion, it often leads to emotional exhaustion, burnout, and a sense that their own needs are invisible. Setting boundaries is the pivotal step that allows an empath to reclaim their energy and begin living from a place of balance. At first, establishing boundaries can feel uncomfortable or even unnatural. Empaths have spent so long prioritizing others that saying no or stepping back can stir feelings of guilt or fear of rejection. They may worry that asserting themselves will hurt someone else or cause conflict. But over time, they start to realize that boundaries are not walls meant to shut people out. They are protective measures that allow the empath to maintain their emotional well-being while still remaining compassionate and loving. Boundaries give empaths the space to distinguish between their own emotions and the emotions of others. This clarity is essential because for years they may have carried burdens that were not theirs to bear, often confusing other people's anxiety, sadness, or anger with their own. By defining limits, empaths learn to respond rather than react, to choose when and where to invest their emotional energy, and to avoid being drained by situations that do not serve their growth or peace. With boundaries in place, the empath begins to notice a profound shift in their relationships. Some people may initially resist or react negatively, especially if they were accustomed to the empath's constant availability. But over time, the relationships that endure tend to deepen, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. Boundaries allow the empath to give from a place of strength rather than obligation, which transforms the quality of their interactions. Moreover, boundaries help empaths cultivate self-respect and self-awareness. They learn to honor their own feelings, needs, and desires without fear of judgment. They no longer measure their worth by how much they sacrifice for others. Instead, they understand that protecting their energy is essential to being genuinely present and compassionate. Ultimately, the power of boundaries lies in their ability to transform the empath's life. They create a framework where giving does not equal depletion, where compassion does not require self-neglect, and where love can exist without losing oneself. For the first time, the empath experiences the freedom to be fully themselves, caring, empathetic, and powerful without being consumed by the emotional weight of the world around them. As an empath begins to prioritize themselves and set healthy boundaries, one of the most noticeable changes is in the people they choose to keep close. For years, empaths often maintain relationships out of a sense of duty, compassion, or guilt, even when those connections are draining or one-sided. They give endlessly to friends, family members, or partners who may not reciprocate that care in a meaningful way. But as they start to honor their own needs, the quality of their connections begins to shift, and their circle becomes smaller, yet far more intentional. At first, this process can feel uncomfortable or even lonely. People who are used to having the empath constantly available may step back, complain, or resist the change. Old patterns of giving without balance are disrupted, and relationships that relied on the empath's overextension naturally fade. This can trigger doubt. The empath may wonder if they are being selfish, too demanding, or unnecessarily rigid. However, with time, they begin to notice a critical difference. The relationships that remain are those that respect boundaries, value emotional energy, and allow for authentic connection. This transformation creates a new kind of intimacy. Instead of feeling obligated to give to everyone, the empath now invests in people who genuinely uplift, support, and understand them. Conversations become deeper, interactions feel more balanced, and the emotional reciprocity that was once rare begins to emerge naturally. The empath no longer measures the success of a relationship by how much they sacrifice, but by how meaningful and nourishing it feels for both sides. Another important aspect is that the empath begins to recognize patterns in their social circle. They can identify who brings energy and joy versus who consistently drains them. This clarity allows them to make conscious choices about where to focus their attention. Over time, the empath learns that fewer relationships can be far more fulfilling than maintaining a large network of connections that leave them emotionally exhausted. This smaller, healthier circle also provides a sense of emotional safety. The empath can be vulnerable without fear of exploitation or misunderstanding. They can express their feelings freely and receive support in return, creating a dynamic of mutual care rather than one-sided responsibility. Ultimately, this shift is liberating. The empath experiences the profound truth that authentic connection does not require endless giving or self-sacrifice. By letting go of relationships that no longer serve them and investing in those that do, they create a network of support that reflects their values and honors their emotional well-being. In this way, choosing themselves does not isolate them. It elevates the quality and depth of the connections that truly matter. When an empath finally chooses themselves, something remarkable begins to happen. They discover a level of inner strength and clarity that they may never have realized existed. For years, they have lived with the weight of other people's emotions, often placing their own needs at the bottom of the priority list. They have given endlessly, forgiven repeatedly, and absorbed pain that was not theirs to carry. But once they begin to honor their own emotional space, they start to notice a profound transformation. Their empathy does not diminish. In fact, it becomes sharper, but it is now guided by wisdom rather than exhaustion. This new phase of life allows the empath to give from a place of abundance instead of obligation. They are no longer constantly drained or fearful of saying no, and their compassion is no longer tied to self-sacrifice. By protecting their energy, they find that they can engage more fully, listen more deeply, and offer genuine support without losing themselves in the process. Their kindness becomes intentional and powerful, rather than automatic and depleting. Another aspect of this transformation is emotional resilience. By choosing themselves, the empath begins to recognize their own boundaries, values, and needs, which strengthens their ability to navigate challenges without being overwhelmed by external pressures. They become less reactive to others' moods and more grounded in their own truth. This stability allows them to approach relationships with clarity, understanding that connection is most meaningful when it flows both ways. Choosing themselves also reveals who truly belongs in their life. Relationships that were once taken for granted are now seen through a lens of respect and reciprocity. People who value the empath for their presence rather than their constant giving remain, while those who relied on exploitation or emotional convenience naturally drift away. This curation of relationships creates an inner circle that is more balanced, supportive, and nourishing, further reinforcing the empath's sense of self-worth and empowerment. Most importantly, this journey leads to a deep sense of self-awareness. The empath begins to trust their intuition, honor their feelings, and act in alignment with their authentic self. They no longer define themselves solely through the lens of others' expectations or emotional needs. Instead, they recognize that their value is inherent and independent of what they give to others. In this way, the empath becomes a person who embodies both strength and compassion. They are capable of deep connection without compromise, capable of love without losing themselves, and capable of presence without exhaustion. By choosing themselves, they step into a life of empowerment where their empathy is not a burden, but a refined superpower, and their inner peace becomes their most potent gift to the world.